Good morning, ladies. So, I know there are still a lot of people out getting food, but I'm going to get started because I was strictly told to start on time. And the only thing that I hate more than public speaking is going over my time limit while public speaking. So, I'm going to get started, and what I'm going to do first, just to kind of start off this morning, is give what I like to kind of say a Spark Note version of my testimony, just for those of you that maybe don't really know who I am. And so my name is Callie Dibbs. The sheet probably told you that. And I came into church from a group called Project 7, which is a Bible club organization that helps students and from anywhere from middle school to high school start Bible schools or Bible studies within their schools. And when I was in high school, it was my junior year of high school when I first met some people that were involved in this Project 7. And when I met them, it was a time in my life when my parents were finishing going through a divorce. I was kind of switching from house to house because if my mom was home, I'd go with her. If my dad was home, I'd go with him. If my dad's girlfriend was home, but those two were gone, then I'd go there. And so it was a time of life that was just there wasn't any order. I was here, I was there, my emotions were here, they were there. And throughout all of that time, my parents' divorce, everything, what kept me was my sports. Basketball was my life, my teammates were my family, and it was something that essentially was my God. It was my religion. That's what kept me grounded and kind of just got me through life. But then it became a point where basketball just didn't do it anymore. And it was God totally directed at the exact time that I decided to quit basketball because I knew that wasn't what was going to help me, that I met a family and I met some people at my high school that invited me to this club called Project 7. And it was one of those things where I was dealing with depression and everything else, and so I basically said, why not? Because I didn't have any answers, and so I decided to go. And the minute I walked in and I got greeted and could just tell that they actually cared about me, I was like, yep, this is pretty cool, this is awesome. And so I started coming, and it just hit me right away from day one, this whole God religion thing. And I was like, yes, I want that. And it didn't take long for me to realize that most of these students leading this P7 club were from the same youth group. And so I was like, hey, let's check out their youth group. Let's take this a step further. I went to it, loved it, fell in love with it. Church became my life, and it was awesome. And then my parents found out, and they didn't like it. And so about a month or two into me just being fully committed, going to every service that I could, getting the Holy Ghost and loving it, I basically was put at a crossroad of you can either choose family, which at that point I didn't have a lot left. It was pretty much just my dad. Or I could choose church because he didn't, for whatever reason, that was the time in my life that he decided to step in, was when I joined a church. And so, obviously, I made the choice to my end of my junior year of high school, as I was coming into my senior year of high school, I decided church. And so I moved out of my parents' house, and I was basically on my own. And so I moved in with a family at the church, and that kind of started the journey that I am on now. Kind of flash forward just to get this part so I can move on, a little Spark Note version, but I have been blessed now to at this point, and I've been in church about 6 years. I have had the great opportunity I've done missions work in Brazil. I have been able to do music ministry, I've done hyphen ministry, I've been able to do children's ministry at my church, and God has really just, in that time of just, what am I going to do next? And being revealed to church and what he has for me, it all just made sense. And I was like, okay, I'm in for this, and I love this, and that has brought me to where I am today. Like I said, super SparkNote version. If I have more time at the end, I will totally go more in depth. Or if you see me throughout the hallways or you want to know more, feel free to stop me and I will totally talk about it. So I'm going to move on to kind of what I have prepared for you guys today. And I have a question. How many of you in this room have ever wondered or thought about how birds navigate and can find their way across hundreds of thousands of miles only to migrate back on that same route? Has anyone in here ever legitimately thought about that? Is there anyone sitting there right now that you're currently like, wow, I never thought of that? But it's kind of cool. So I'll be honest, I never thought about that question until this message, until I was preparing this message. And I will say, it's something that is kind of considered a phenomenon because there's many scientists that have actually studied this idea, but they have yet to come to a conclusion on exactly how birds can navigate thousands of miles to then turn around and follow that same exact path back home. And I found myself one day just kind of preparing for this message and praying for what God was asking me to talk to you guys about today and just to lead me into what he wants me to share this morning. And an image of a bird kept popping into my mind as I was praying. And as most people would do, I ignored it because I was like, I'm sorry, God, but I'm talking about finding your place. A bird? How can a bird have anything to do with that? But then I got to thinking, and I started thinking about how can they travel miles away from their nest and then find their way back home? And essentially, how do birds find their place? And as I mentioned, this question is one that scientists have studied for centuries, and a few different theories have been developed. And of those theories, there is one that has made its way to the top of the list. And I will say, if there's any bird fanatics in here, or what I'm about to say is something that I should have learned in my 6th grade science class, and I don't remember it, just act like your mind to be blown like mine was when I read it. So, just like humans have used magnetic compasses for centuries to find their way, birds have the ability to use the Earth's magnetic field to travel. It is believed that birds can see and sense this magnetic field that we as humans are blind to. And the ability to sense and see this magnetic field is due to how their eyes, beak, and brain are all connected. There have been experiments after experiments of scientists capturing different birds, bringing and flying them to completely different locations, and releasing them just to see what happens, to see where they went. And in almost every experiment, regardless of where they were released from, the birds were able to navigate home without any trouble. And so I decided to take this research one step further and look into exactly what a magnetic field is. And by definition, a magnetic field is a vector field that describes the magnetic influence on moving electric charges, electric currents, and magnetic materials. But get this, a moving charge in a magnetic field experiences a force perpendicular to its own velocity into the magnetic field. And I think it's safe to assume most of you in here are probably not science or math majors, so I'll completely rephrase all of that, basically stating there is this magnetic field that is created from the way that the north and the south poles of the Earth interact, which literally God thought about everything. When birds are in flight and they're moving forward, because of this magnetic field, there's a force that they experience that is perpendicular or straight up and down. So as they're going this way, there's a force that they feel above them that guides them to where they need to go. And it was during this research that God kind of revealed something to me. Just as God meticulously created this magnetic field for birds to travel, he has created a spiritual field that we as his children are called to feel and to see. And it's this field that comes with that perpendicular force that can help guide us. And it's what we feel when we're moving forward or backward. It's when we're caught up on a decision, it's this force that can help guide us to the right answer. When we are told that gut-wrenching news, it's this force that can help guide us to God's peace. And when we are trying to find our place, our calling, our ministry, it's this force that can help guide us to where God is calling us to go. Or exactly what was talked about this morning, when God is trying to speak to us and tell us what we should be doing, whether it's in a service or next in our life, it's this force that will help guide you to what God is wanting you to do. But the caveat, the only way for us to have the ability to see and to feel this spiritual field and the force that comes with it is for our heart, our mind, and our eyes to all be connected with each other and connected with God. Or what was spoken last night. The only way for us to be able to feel this force is for our full armor of God to be on and to be ready to go. Proverbs 4:20 through 27 reads, "My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Keep your mouth free from perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil." Every part of our body needs to be in connection with each other and in connection with God. And so what I want to share with you guys kind of the rest of this morning is what could cause our heart, our mind, and our eyes to become disconnected and therefore lead us to a place where we can no longer experience this force that God has placed in our lives to help guide us? Or what can cause us to not hear that still small voice that was talked about this morning? And in my journey with God, I have come to realize three major disconnectors, or what I want to call parallel forces, because we have a perpendicular force that God will give us, and a parallel force is something that would come directly across it. So what could cause us, or what could stop that force from allowing to reach us? The first one is your view of you doesn't match God's view of you. If you are going to live for God, the devil is going to challenge you, and unfortunately, God is going to let him. Just look at Job. The majority of these challenges will be done in your mind, because the greatest and the only weapon that the devil has is his voice. The devil doesn't have the power to destroy you, and so the only way for him to win is to get you to destroy yourself. And I think it's probably safe to say that Jesus probably had a battle himself within his mind. He had no dad. He was considered an illegitimate child. And I can't help to assume that even back in his day, there were probably bullies that reminded him of his heritage and who he was over and over again. Jesus probably had a fight to remember who he truly was and fight to remember that he was the Messiah. And despite all that he did in his life, all the miracles, all the signs, all the wonders, neither his mother or his earthly father knew who he was. And what that tells me is that who Jesus was not something that his mama could tell him. It wasn't something that Joseph could tell him. It was something that he had to figure out for himself from his connection with God. So why is that important? Well, one of my favorite quotes ever is, "It is impossible to function beyond the level of your belief in your own self." And I'll say that one more time. It is impossible to function beyond the level of your belief in your own self. This is why fasting makes you so powerful, because it can literally change your view of you. And what you think about yourself is either going to release or hinder the will of God. When you can embrace God's view of you, it doesn't matter what kind of past you had to endure. It doesn't matter what weaknesses you face. You can be mighty in God. You can be powerful. You can be world-changing, and you can be kingdom-building. Matthew 16:13 reads, "When Jesus came to the region of Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do you say the Son of Man is?' And they replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And then he looked at Simon Peter, and he asked, "What about you? Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." And the next verse says, And I tell you that you are Peter. As soon as you can see who Jesus is correctly, he can help you see who you are correctly. You can't find it by self-examination, no Enneagram test, which I do love Enneagram, but no mentor, no parent, none of them can tell you who you truly are. Only God can. And growing up, there are two major factors that produce identity in your life: how your family sees you and how your peers see you, especially how your father sees you. And something I want to point out is Isaiah, he was the son of strength. That's what his father's name is translated to. Jeremiah was the son of portion of Jehovah. That's pretty cool. Samuel was the son of God provided. That's some pretty cool heritage, and those men did pretty incredible things. But on the flip side, there's three other individuals. Moses was the son of broken slaves, and he stuttered. Elijah had no lineage worth mentioning. He just showed up in the Bible. And then there was Elijah. Nothing about him. And then there is Jesus of Nazareth, which is kind of considered the ghetto of the Bible, and he was an illegitimate birth. Each of those three struggled for their identity. Each did 40-day fasts in the Bible, and each were able to break through the perspective that the world put on them. The two greatest questions that you will ever face in your life are, who is God, and who are you in God? You may have been told your whole life who you are, but if you have not done so already, you need to take some time to figure out who God says you are by first taking time to figure out who God is. Why? Because it is impossible to function beyond the level of your belief in your own self. In beginning of my church, in my church experience, I always told myself, I can never be used by God. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. I wasn't raised in this. My family isn't in church. I've made too many mistakes. I could never teach a session at ladies' retreat. But what you believe is what you will achieve. I am a child of God. I am chosen. I am loved. I am a forerunner in my family. I am redeemed, and I am here. So who is God, and who are you in God? The second disconnector that I want to talk about is you have an inability to be vulnerable. A while back, I came across a life-changing TED Talk done by Brené Brown titled The Power of Vulnerability. And yes, I am a college student that loves TED Talks. Just is what it is. I wish I could say, growing up, I struggled with vulnerability, and, through the years, I've learned how to completely embrace and show my vulnerability, but I'd be lying. Vulnerability is something that I still struggle with, and I'm still trying to fully embrace. So I completely understand, even when I talk about this, that it can be difficult to be vulnerable, and it'll be difficult for most people. But listen to this. Brown is a researcher that has spent years studying shame and then vulnerability. And in her studies with shame, she came across the realization that she could categorize every individual that she worked with into two different categories. Number one, those who have a sense of worthiness, love, and belonging. Number two, those that struggle for it and question if they are even good enough for worthiness, love, and belonging. There's one variable that set these two groups apart from one another, and it was that those who have a strong sense of love and belonging believed that they were worthy of love and belonging. Additionally, and I think most importantly, she learned that those who had a sense of love and belonging embraced vulnerability because they understood that what made them vulnerable is what made them beautiful. What causes you to be vulnerable is what causes you to be beautiful and to be unique and to be you and to be the you that I just talked about, not the you that you have been told who you are your whole life. Our ability to be vulnerable is life-altering, and a lack of vulnerability could lead us to becoming disconnected from that spiritual field and that force that can help guide us. How? Because at the end of the day, we can't choose what emotions we're going to feel. You can either choose to feel or you choose to numb. You self-medicate, you do drugs, you vape, you get into ungodly relationships, you binge watch TV. Personally, I self-harmed, I stopped eating, and I disconnected from people. That's how I numbed my feelings. But when we choose to numb, it feels great because you can't feel the betrayal, you can't feel the heartbreak, you can't feel the anxiety, but you also can't feel God's love and his joy and his peace. When you choose to feel, it will hurt. Probably a lot. But when you choose to feel, you're choosing to feel God's love and God's joy and God's peace and his grace once you work through that pain. And embracing vulnerability allows us to reach a point of knowing that we are worthy of love and belonging. We are worthy of God's direction. We are worthy of the call and the place that we are being led to. The third and final disconnector that I want to talk about is something that I'm going to title roadblocks. And I'm getting a little short on time, so I can't discuss all of them. But we as humans, we encounter roadblocks, whether it's in our personal life, whether it's in our ministry, friendships becoming toxic, overcommitting to too many things, anxiety taking over our emotions, all real and difficult roadblocks to work through. And like I said, I wish I had time to, talk about every single one and lay them all out for you and what I've learned, but I don't. So what I am doing instead is I am going to share some other people's perspectives or practical tips on these topics in the form of books. I don't know if we have any readers in here, and if you're not a reader, I highly recommend that you start. Maybe my list can get you started. On your way out, there are going to be bookmarks. And on these bookmarks, there's a list of the books and the roadblocks that they discuss. These are all books that have been recommended to me in my walk with God. Most of them on there, because I came from a very broken past, are roadblocks or things that I personally have faced and worked through. I've read all these books. They are incredible. And it's a little fancy. At the bottom of the bookmark, there's a QR code. Wait. If you scan that QR code, it's going to bring you to an Amazon list with all the books right there. I was pretty impressed. It's fine. And there are even more books on that list than that are on the bookmark. So there's books on there that discuss overcommitment, friendships, burnout, lack of direction, anxiety, disorganization. And like I said, they are all incredible books. They have great information, just depending on what roadblock that you may be facing. And I will kind of take a step aside and I want to say that, obviously, first and foremost, be sure to study out what the Bible says about your roadblock, because no book, no person can give you any better advice than the Bible. However, I also understand that sometimes supplementing that with others' perspectives and practical tips of how to work through it can be a huge help. So just to kind of wrap everything up, I want to share one last finding. In one experiment that I was looking into regarding the birds, the researchers decided to take things a step further. They decided to completely disorient the birds through closed cylinders. They turned the lights on and off, and they even messed with the magnetic field around them. After letting them loose to their surprise, the birds were not fazed, and they found their way home with no issues. When our heart, our mind, and our eyes are all focused on God, no matter what life throws our way, we can make it through. When people try to put us in a box, you're too shy to share your testimony. You're too new to church to do that thing. You're just the pastor's kid, which I want to take a moment to say. A testimony of resilience, perseverance, and commitment is just as powerful as a testimony of redemption. I've heard so many people say, well, I don't have a testimony. I've been in church my whole life. That is a testimony. God's protection and his shield on your life to continue in something like this, in a world like this, that's a testimony worth sharing. When life tries to pull us away from the spiritual fields, sports becoming more important than church, social media taking up more time than our Bible reading, when the devil tries to turn our lights out, you aren't worthy, your family doesn't love you, you've messed up too many times. When our heart, our mind, and our eyes are all grounded in God and connected with God, there is that perpendicular force stemming from a spiritual field that God has created for us, his children, that is stronger than any other force that can come against you. Your view of you matters. What makes you vulnerable makes you beautiful, and roadblocks happen, but it is imperative that you spend time learning how to fix that road. And this is something that the minute I got this email saying, hey, we want you to speak, I'll be honest, when I first read it, I was like, no. And then I was like, okay, but God, I guess I can do it. And after about a month of just thinking about it, I knew this is what I wanted to talk about, because so often in church, when we're struggling, when we can't feel God, we don't feel that connection, we can't feel that force that he's given in our life, we're told, well, just go pray about it more. Just go find more Bible verses to read. And although that is so important, and that should be something you are doing, life happens. And sometimes there's things that we need to really think about, and we need to work through, and we need to be able to name and call out these disconnectors, because you can't get rid of them if you don't know that they are there. And so I just really want, if there's 3 things to get out of today, I'm going to read them again. And it's this. Your view of you does matter. What makes you vulnerable is what makes you beautiful. And like I said, roadblocks will happen. But it's imperative for you to call them out and to work through them and to fix that road that you're trying to travel on versus just ignoring it. Well, I'm a bad Christian if I try to deal with that. Well, if I'm dealing with this, it's because God isn't connected with me. No, life happens. There are so many stories in the Bible of people that questioned God, that struggled with things. But they found a way to get through it. And that's what I charge you guys, and I just pray over you guys that that's something that as you walk away today, you can remember those few things. So thank you. You guys listen a lot better than my Sunday school kids at church do. I typically have to stop like 5 or 6 times to be like, yeah, I do love your shoes, but we're kind of talking right now. So I want to thank you guys for just coming this morning. And like I said, if you have any questions, if you want to know anything more about me and you see me out and about the rest of the conference, feel free to stop me. I enjoy talking one-on-one a whole lot more than this, so I am all for it. So thank you guys.